A reservation on Priyanka's calendar is booked 14 years from now. Support says the system doesn't even generate dates that far out. She can't delete it. You're about to hear 5 stories about the strangest things that can happen when you open your home to strangers for a living. Every one of these is a work of fiction, written for this channel, but if you've ever hosted, you already know. The platform sees things about your own property before you do. Let's get into it. Story 1: The booking that won't cancel. A reservation on Priyanka's calendar is booked 14 years from now. Support says the system doesn't even generate dates that far out. She can't delete it. Priyanka had hosted the guest cottage behind her house for going on 5 years, long enough to have the calendar management down to a routine. She barely had to think about any more, blocking off her own travel dates, adjusting pricing around local events, approving the handful of bookings that came in most weeks. The booking appeared on a Tuesday, wedged into the calendar between 2 ordinary reservations, for a single night 14 years in the future. No guest name, no profile photo, just a confirmed paid reservation sitting there in bright green, blocking a date that far ahead, exactly the way a real booking would. She assumed a glitch and opened a support ticket, expecting an easy fix. The representative went quiet for a moment after pulling up her listing, then told her carefully that the booking system's calendar interface doesn't render dates more than 2 years out at all. There was no technical way for what she was looking at to exist in the first place. She tried deleting it herself anyway. The cancel button grayed out the instant she hovered over it, the same way the platform disables cancellation on a reservation that's already checked in, already in progress, already being paid for in real time. Support escalated it internally and came back a week later with an answer that unsettled her more than a shrug would have. The reservation did have a booking ID, valid, generating real revenue projections in her host dashboard, attached to a guest account that had technically not been created yet, since the platform doesn't allow account creation more than a few months in advance either. She asked, since they were already this deep into it, what would happen on that date 14 years from now if the guest account genuinely never came into existence. The representative told her after checking with a second team that the system had no defined behavior for that scenario. Nobody at the company had ever needed to write one because it had never happened before. She searched host forums that same week, half expecting to find nothing, and found a single post from 4 years earlier, a different host entirely, describing an identical far future booking on a different property in a different state, no name attached, no replies beneath it. The account that posted it deleted sometime since, the way a thread gets scrubbed once whoever wrote it decides they'd rather not be found by anyone asking follow-up questions. Priyanka still hosts the cottage. The booking is still there, sitting quietly in a spot on the calendar she now scrolls past, without letting herself really look at it. Still paid, still confirmed, still 14 years away, and getting no closer with each year that actually passes, since the date on it she's checked has never once ticked down. Story 2: Every 5 stars. One guest has left the exact same 5-star review, word for word, before every single one of her stays, sometimes hours before she's even checked in. Renata had noticed the pattern only because she happened to be refreshing her listing page. The Moment a new review posted, expecting to see it appear after checkout the way every other review on the platform worked, timestamped to the end of a stay. This one posted at 10 in the morning. The guest's check-in time wasn't until 3 that afternoon. The review already described the exact temperature of the guest room, the specific creak in the third stair, and a compliment about the coffee Renata hadn't yet brewed for that particular stay. She told herself it was a copy-paste mistake on the guest's part, an old review resubmitted by accident, until she pulled up the guest's full history on her listing and found the same review, word for word, letter for letter, attached to 6 separate stays going back 3 years, each one posted hours before that specific stay's check-in time. She messaged the guest directly, as politely as she could manage, asking if there'd been some mix-up with the review timing. The reply came back within a minute. No mix-up, she just likes to write them in advance since she already knows how the stay is going to go. Renata checked the platform's own posting rules that night, certain there had to be a restriction against reviewing a stay that hadn't started. There was reviews are locked until 48 hours after checkout, enforced at the platform level, no exceptions listed anywhere in the policy. She contacted support with screenshots. They confirmed the restriction existed and confirmed after checking the account that this guest's reviews had somehow never once been subject to it. The guest's 7th stay is booked for next month. Renata considered canceling it outright, then found this morning a new 5-star review already posted to her listing, describing that exact upcoming visit in detail she has not yet lived through herself. Renata still hasn't decided whether to let the booking stand. She's read the review only once, the whole thing, and has since made a point of not reading it again, mostly because of the last line, which doesn't describe anything about the room at all. Only that she's looking forward to seeing Renata again, in a tone that assumes this has happened between them many times before. Story 3: The Lockbox. The Lockbox code Marcus set that morning was gone by evening, replaced with a 4-digit code. He's never used one that matches, according to his own records, the very first code the property ever had 6 years earlier. Marcus managed the smart lockbox on his rental the way he managed everything else about the place, remotely through an app, changing the entry code before every new guest as a basic security habit he'd kept up since his very first booking. He set that week's code at 9 that morning, watched the app confirm the update, and thought nothing more of it until a guest texted that evening, confused, saying the code Marcus had sent didn't work, but an old code she'd apparently been given a link to somewhere on the listing worked just fine. He checked the app immediately. The active code shown on his end was the one he'd set that morning. He asked the guest to read back exactly what she'd typed. It matched, digit for digit, the very first code he'd ever assigned the lockbox back when the listing had gone live 6 years earlier, a code he was certain existed nowhere in his current records, changed and overwritten dozens of times since. He drove out to check the physical lockbox himself, assuming a firmware glitch, some cached code stuck in the hardware. The lockbox's own small screen confirmed the current code as the one he'd set that morning, exactly as the app claimed. And yet the guest had gotten in, was already inside, had been for over an hour by the time he arrived. He asked her, standing in the doorway, exactly how she'd found that old code, since it wasn't Printed anywhere current. She showed him a text message, supposedly sent from his own number, time-stamped that afternoon, containing the 6-year-old code and nothing else, a message Marcus has no record of ever sending from a phone that was in his own pocket, locked, the entire time it was apparently Zend. He pulled his own oldest records that night, curious who exactly had stayed at the property. Under that original 6-year-old code, back before he'd ever changed it the first time. The name on file matched no one currently in his guest history, a booking made through an account that the platform confirmed when he asked support to check had been deleted years ago for reasons their own system no longer retained any record of. He changed the code again that night and again the next morning, checking obsessively for days. Afterward, it held. Whatever had happened, it happened exactly once, to exactly that guest, and Marcus has since made a habit of driving out in person to personally check the lockbox before every single new arrival, no matter how reliable the app claims to be. He did look up that guest's stay more carefully afterward, curious what, if anything, connected her to the property's earliest days. Her account had been created that same week, brand new, no prior stays anywhere on the platform. Nothing that should have given her any reason to know a 6-year-old code even existed to look for. Story 4: The Cleaner's Note. Every cleaner who has ever serviced the guest room, across 6 years and 4 different cleaning companies, has left an identical handwritten note on the same day of every month, without ever having seen the others write it first. Desmond didn't clean the property himself, just managed the schedule, cycling through cleaning services over the years the way any host eventually does, whichever company happened to be reliable and reasonably priced that season. He only noticed the pattern because a new cleaner, on her very first visit, left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter that seemed oddly specific for someone who'd never been inside the property before, a warning in her own handwriting not to open the closet in the guest room after dark. He assumed she'd read something in an old guidebook left behind by a previous cleaner, and thought little of it until he found the exact same note, same wording, same instruction in his records from a completely different cleaning company 2 years earlier, a company that had gone out of business, whose former staff he had no way of contacting to ask where the warning had actually come from. He dug through 6 years of digital cleaning logs that weekend, cross-referencing every note left by every cleaner across 4 separate companies who had never worked together, never trained each other, and in most cases had never even overlapped in employment dates. The note appeared in 14 separate instances, always on the same day of the month, always in that cleaner's own natural handwriting rather than a copied phrase, always the same core warning about the same closet. He asked the current cleaner directly why she'd written it, expecting her to admit she'd found an old note and copied the habit. She told him, confused by the question, that she hadn't seen any old note at all. She'd simply felt standing in that room for the first time that leaving the warning was the correct thing to do, the way you'd feel compelled to lock a door behind you without being told to. Desmond opened the closet himself that same afternoon, expecting nothing, prepared to feel foolish about it. It was empty, ordinary, a few spare hangers and a folded blanket, nothing that should inspire. 6 years of independent warnings from people who had never spoken to each other. He left the note up on the counter anyway, the next time a new company took over the cleaning. Contract, along with brief instructions for the closet that he now includes for every incoming. Crew, not because he believes there's anything wrong with it, he tells himself, but because. Something about breaking a 6-year pattern feels more dangerous than simply continuing it. Story 5, read at 3:14. A guest who checked out 3 weeks ago is still marked active in Diego's messaging app, sending red receipts every single night at exactly the same time from a phone he personally confirmed was returned broken beyond power on. Diego always messaged departing guests a quick thank you note through the platform's app once. They'd checked out, mostly a courtesy, occasionally leading to a good review if he timed it right. He sent that message the way he always did, the morning after a guest named Owen checked out, following what had been an unremarkable, easy stay. The message sat unread for a day, which was normal. Then it showed as read at 3:14 in the morning, 3 weeks later, and every single night after that, always the same time, down to the minute. He assumed Owen had simply opened old messages out of habit. It stopped feeling that way on the 5th consecutive night, when he checked the exact timestamp against his own clock and realized 3:14 was the precise minute, to the second, that Owen had originally checked into the property weeks earlier, a time stamped in Diego's own booking records, not something a guest scrolling through old messages would have any reason to replicate this precisely night after night. He messaged Owen directly, asking, as casually as he could manage, if everything was all right. No reply came. The message stayed marked delivered, then read at 3:14 the following morning, same. As always. He tracked down Owen's phone number through the platform's guest contact system and called it. A woman answered, confused, and told him that Owen's phone had been physically destroyed. Dropped, cracked beyond any possibility of powering on, the same week he'd checked out Diego's property and had been sitting in a drawer, broken, ever since. Diego checked his own app's read receipt settings that night, looking for some explanation involving cached data or a delayed sync from before the phone broke. The platform's support team, when he asked, confirmed that red receipts require an active connected device at the moment the message is opened. There is no technical way for a broken powered-off phone to generate one, cached or otherwise. He mentioned it, mostly out of frustration, to the previous owner of the property, whom he still occasionally texted about maintenance questions. The man went quiet for longer than the question warranted, then admitted that he'd had a similar guest once, years before Diego bought the place, and had solved it, in his words, simply by never renting that particular room out again, advice he said he probably should have passed along sooner and clearly hadn't expected Diego to actually need. The message still shows as read every night at 3:14. Diego has stopped sending departure messages to anyone else who's ever stayed in that same room just to see, he tells himself, whether the pattern is about the guest or about the room. A question he has not yet found the nerve to actually test. That's it for this one. If you liked it, you know what to do.